Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
So our
Okay.
panel discussion now is going to be on bridging the pockets of spiritual wisdom, and we are here with going to have with two wonderful women souls, Pat Duckworth and Christina Wessendorf. So Pat Duckworth, as you know, we are all discussing a long time about so many aspects of spirituality in all its dimensions. So basically, the word parliament and spirituality, as you observe, is categorized into two. One is pure spirituality, the other is the applied spirituality. So the pure spirituality is related to the inner awakening and inner journey, while the applied spirituality is what we apply, how we apply the spiritual wisdom to the social reality, like spirituality, health, environment, education, so on and so forth. Now, as a part of that, we are here with to be a part of this panel discussion, bridging of the pockets of spiritual wisdom across the world. As you observe, Christiana, there are pockets of spiritual wisdom everywhere, be it Egypt, be it Middle East, be it Europe, be it everywhere. So there are pockets of spiritual wisdom, the ancient ones and the modern ones. So how we actually bridge these pockets of spiritual wisdom? Because people who are living in one particular area of the world are very much conditioned to the availability of spiritual wisdom, the way they perceive it, the way they understand. But there are so many formats of spiritual wisdom available in many, many ways, in many, many languages, through different ways and styles and formats and cultures. So how we can actually bridge these pockets, Pat backward. So I would like to listen from you first, how we all can think of bridging these pockets to create a overall unconditional unity consciousness across the world.
That is a huge question for this time of the morning here. And part of the challenge is that we're all on our own spiritual journey. So even within ourselves, we're trying to negotiate this space of our pure spirit and how we apply it. And it often gets mixed up with religion, that we think that spirituality is only found in religion, where of course our spirituality is so much more than that. It's who we are essentially as people and how we live our lives and how we impact on other people. So part of this journey of the bridging comes with how we ourselves bridge between our own spiritual journey and that outside of ourselves. And I have found this to be a very difficult question. I spent the first over 50 years of my life as a Christian and going to church and believing that this was where my spirituality lay, instead of thinking much wider than that about what my calling was and my purpose and how I would be helping community and other people. So I think there needs to be some encouragement, some way of people being able to express their individual spirituality in order to communicate it to other people. Often the words aren't there for these deep spiritual concepts. It's how we feel and what we do. So I think you've posed me too difficult a question for this morning. If we can lower some of the barriers between our the masks that we wear in order to navigate the world, and if we can start to lower those and actually show who we truly are to other people, we can start bridging the gaps between each other as we recognize our own essential humanity and the fact that we are spiritual beings living this human material life, so we can find connections with each other and find the common ground between what we're all trying to do in the way that we live our lives. So this parliament is such a way of doing this, of being able to listen and communicate with each other. And I have hope that, as we all become more awakened to ourselves and the world, that we will be able to communicate better about and bridge with each other on spirituality. I haven't answered the problem. I've only posed more questions.
Yeah, thank you, Pat Duckworth. See, when we are trying to move and break the barriers which are separating different pockets of wisdom, these barriers are psycho-emotional in nature. These barriers are related to perspectives and one's perceptions, so on one's belief systems and ideologies as well. But still, if we can break these barriers, if we can penetrate through these barriers, I think the unity consciousness will be much more powerful and magnificent and much useful to the world, so that we can encompass and engulf all the individualized or separated consciousness of human beings spread across the world. So when we started this World Parliament as well, at a personal level, I had a lot of tough time when I was conversing with the people living in South America. So all the 15 countries approximately living in South America, they are not used to English, and I don't know Spanish or Portuguese as well. See the difficulty. But surprisingly, very, very surprisingly, the South American team is so strong that they have more than 220 or 230 speakers from all countries of South America. They have established the South American Council of the World Net as well, and they are going to announce the nationwide movement in next year, 2021 as well. So we are all breaking the barriers. All the linguistic barriers have been broken down. So people have started behaving like global citizens. People who are traveling at least. So even people who are not traveling, by way of reading books, by way of exposing to these events like this, they're thinking like global citizens. So the time has come when we actually need to break these barriers of nationality, language, culture, gender, skin tone, age, all these factors which seemingly much separative from each other will be definitely broken. How do you see all these things, Christiana? What are your inputs in how we can actually break these barriers, and how you think that we can really create the unity consciousness, bridging these pockets of spiritual wisdom across the world?
Love this. I would love to introduce another idea. I believe breaking barriers is something what it seems like. It feels so hard. It feels so heavy. Like it feels like we can never break something. So I would love to introduce the idea of melting it away. Is this kind of approach, where you feel like, first of all, it feels easier, right? Okay, I will melt it. And it feels more doable, and it feels like this is now a peace mission. Because when we are talking about breaking, it feels more like a fight mission. Let's create a wall. Let's you know what I mean? I hope you hear me in this. So it's, yes, we want to create a unity, but we are talking about breaking, and you know what I mean? So melting it away. And this is what I found when I was in Egypt, and I accepted to be second wife. And it was totally against my needs and totally against of who I am. So I had this big inner fight of me. And so I was fighting against myself, and until I found a method to melt it away, and finally, have this open conversation with myself. And this, what I'm doing, and this is also what I'm believing in, is that we need to find a universal communication tool beyond the beliefs, beyond the languages, beyond the cultures. And what I found, and I made a summit around this, and I had, a lot of speakers who shared their idea about what is the universal communication tool to share your inner world, because this is what we want, right? Okay, cool. So, and this, what I found is through inner picture work, like from this inside out, like Tatsek, like you said, and through an approach through pictures or music, because this is what is universal. So now imagine, my friends, that when we are here in a discussion, and there are translators when we have different languages, right? And that's fine. But still, Dr. Yugandhar, you use the word like, right, breaking having transformation, and I use another word, and everybody of us has their own perception of this word. So even when we say a word and it's translated into the other language, we might feel still that, oh, this is negative for me, even though you meant it in a positive way. So what if we have an additional tool on the screen where we pop up a heart, and everybody understands that a heart means that it's a positive intention and that it's a positive word for us. So I'm working on one of my missions is to support intergovernmental conversations, what is about war and peace, with this visualization process, so that the people can look beyond the words and start to have this more open up, that words or proposals are seen in a different way than in the time itself, when they don't have any other communication tool but just the words. Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, symbol from Pat Duckworth. Nice. So yeah, breaking the barriers, this cannot be forceful. This cannot be commanded. So it has to, as you told, we have to melt down to open up for new energy, the new force, new understanding, whatever. So, but people in the world, most of the people, in fact, majority, maybe more than 90% of the people, won't travel much. Maybe they travel within the country or within the state, and many of the people who are not exposed to cross-continental exchange of knowledge. For example, most of the world doesn't know the wisdom of South America. Because of language barrier, huge language barrier. Many of the people do not know what is happening from the spiritual point of view in Africa. Many of the people do not know what is the wisdom of the islands of Australasia, Micronesian, South Pacific Islands. Many of the people do not know. But with the help of events like the World Parliament, we are bringing all these pockets of wisdom into the limelight and bridging all the wisdom. And we are seeing that wisdom, wherever it is same, is one. So with the help of this type of platforms, we are definitely bridging. And nationality is one another major barrier, which is a stumbling block for this unity consciousness. The nationalism or chauvinism, whatever you call it, or a fundamentalistic patriotism type of things. This type of things, in the name of patriotism, in the name of nationalism, so many untoward and antisocial elements, activities have been happening in the name of too much of affiliation or too much of attachment to one's own nation. So nationality sometimes becomes barrier to bridge different pockets of wisdom. So how do you see, Pat Duckworth, how we can actually bring all the nationals across the world? Some nations may be hostile to each other. They are playing the rivalry games or whatsoever. But as far as spirituality is concerned, spiritual wisdom is concerned, everything has to be united. Everything has to be connected. All the pockets of wisdom need to be connected. How do you have any more insights to speak about how we can actually cross or break these national barriers as far as the spiritual understanding, as far as the spiritual flow of wisdom is concerned?
So strangely, I think that one of the blessings of this pandemic has been the communication that's happened online. I've been fortunate in the past to travel to many countries to speak to people. 3 times I've been to Delhi and kind of absorbed some of the Indian culture. But that isn't open to everybody. And so there will be all these pockets of people around the world who never leave their country, who never hear different ideas, who never are in contact with other cultures. And yet, because of the pandemic, many more people have come online to communicate with people in different countries online. And I think that can only be a benefit as we upskill people in how to communicate. And one of the things that I took part in was a retreat that was actually happening in Peru. Now, I'd never intended to go to Peru, although it sounds amazing because I thought it's too far to go. But at the end of the weekend of being on an online retreat in Peru, I felt like I'd been there. I felt like I'd absorbed part of that culture. I'd seen a shamanic ritual. I'd actually seen the countryside in the images. And so part of what Christina's saying is that sometimes we don't have the words for things, but if we see the images, if we see the people, if we can relate on that personal level, instead of trying to relate on, the whole of Peru, if I see some Peruvian people and see their smiles and see some of their culture, I can start to feel more connected with them. And so it's this grassroots, it's the people who can connect one-to-one, who overcome some of those blocks that there are, to use Christina's phrase of melting it away. It melts it away when we're human to human, when we're person to person, and we can share our understandings or just part of our lives. If we can look into somebody's eyes, even if it's on the screen, we get some feeling for those people. So breaking down the barriers, in some ways, I think because we're not physically traveling so much, it's more inclusive because people can get access to the internet and be able to talk to each other. I have great hope that good things will come out of the situation that we're in.
So it is finally the all-inclusive phenomena, eliminating all types of fundamentalism, all types of rigid perceptual systems. So it is finally the breaking of psycho-emotional rigidities and psycho-emotional conditionings, which are very, very important for people, individuals, and institutions and communes to actually join together and work for the greater cause. But herewith I have a question, Christiana. See, even in the name of spirituality, spiritual idealism, or spiritual fundamentalism, or pathological attachment to one's own spiritual communes, to excessive thinking, working, feeling, believing for one's own ideologies. So all these things become major gravitational forces to work against this bridging consciousness. How do you think these spiritual communes, how do you think these spiritual institutions, how do you think these spiritual individuals even who are much more attached to their own ideologies, be it a regional level, be it on a particular philosophy or a particular perceptual truth, perceptual understanding, whatever you call it. So how do you actually connect? And these communes, basically, communes and institutions are, they don't want their own members to crisscross or cross the barriers and move on to make them learn from other pockets of wisdom, make them learn from other spiritual masters, make them learn from other communes. So how we can actually make these communes interdependent, how we can make these spiritual institutions interrelated and interdependent, because everything without interdependence, without interrelationship, nothing really grows in isolation. So isolated growth is only a myth as far as I'm concerned. So growth is always global, growth is always holistic, growth is always integrated. So how we can create this holistic thinking, how we can create this integrated approaches, and how we can bridge all these communes and institutions spread across the world. What are your inputs and insights regarding this? I would like to listen.
So if I understand your question well, the question is, when there are other institutions who are spiritual or religious, and they have a very different belief, and they don't want their members to just to grow within the unite belief, right? Was this a question?
Yeah. So
okay, cool.
How we can make them allow to understand, make them
yes, understand. That's a good keyword. Yeah. Okay, that's a beautiful question, because when I was living in this Muslim country, Egypt, I had some of my students or interested people who said, well, my parents never will understand me. My parents will never understand, right? That I want to go to Europe and there's a better life for me. My parents will never, okay, career-wise, they will understand this, right? But they will not understand that I don't feel I belong, because even my generation, I'm 28, right? So my generation in Egypt is even like, I believe it's nearly like all the other generations now in my age on the world or who comes after us. So the generations already grew up with this. We don't know why, but their soul already screams to be united, like to believe that there is something more global. And so they have a conflict with their parents. So I see, like from my experience, I can see that the parents or the parents' generation in some countries, or here as an example in Egypt, are kind of this rigid institutions who are only thinking like, do this, and this is your best, and they don't want to let their kids expand and be on their own spiritual journey. So how do we bridge? This is how I break it down now. I hope it's okay for you all. So how do we bridge the understanding between the parents and the kids? And so, I mean, I have the same story, right? My family, I'm the first one in my family who is a coach. I'm the first one who is is this intercultural peacemaker and who's called for so much more. And so my family does not really understand what I'm doing, and I'm not sure if they ever will. But here's what I found out. My very specific answer to your question, Mr. Yugandhar, is share our vulnerabilities. Share from a very human point how, related to us, not to what everybody else should do, but related to us, how we feel and how, how what we would love to feel and be in relationship with others. So, right, how do we bridge this? Well, do we say, I know you think like this, but I invite you to be more open. This might never work, right? Can you please think about, connecting to all the other institutions? Can you please say your kids that they should do this? Can you please allow your kid to do this? This is so difficult. But when the kid comes to the parent, or we approach another institutions as a parliament, right? And we say, you know what? Personally, we love to be human, right? We are this person, like we are this institution, and we believe that we all are one. But you know what? I feel so sad. I feel so sad because we both never spoke. I feel so sad because I would love to learn from you, but you are never there for me. You always kick me out when I try to approach you and write you an email, right? And I really want to tell you that I think you're totally okay like you are. And I believe that I just want to love to have a nice talk together. So you know what I mean? Like from this me perspective, from this very getting down to very vulnerable forest, very opening up our humanity and bringing it in front of others. I believe that for other people, it's such, I experienced with my parents, with my sister, I had for years not a good relationship. And when I started this, like she started to open up and say, okay, well, somehow now we are connected, because it's just from the human point, like Pat said. Does it make sense? It's an answer who's kind of very broken down, right? This is from my experience.
Yeah. So thank you, Christiana. Based upon this, I would like to share an insight. Maybe Pat Duckworth will expand on that. See, if you observe the history of evolution of humans, one community or one tribe or one group of individuals have been persecuted just because they are small in number, they have different ideologies, and they have different gender or different color, whatever, different types of discrimination. Even if you take the example of Africa, which has a great old history of human civilization and a lot of pockets of wisdom across African continent. Though Africa, no, when we call someone an African or something as African, the dark, no, it is kept in dark, or they are dark in nature. They are not knowledgeable, they are not wise. But there are so many Africans which are much wise, much enlightened, much awakened. They are the custodians of truth, the custodians of the indigenous spiritual wisdom. And now the whites who have come from Europe, they have dominated the country. They changed their language from indigenous native languages to French and English and other languages, Dutch and whatever. So now the native Indians, the native Africans who were persecuted by the people who navigated to their lands, at present are getting persecuted by the native people. So the scene has been reversed. Now the people who were persecuted are now persecuting the people who are settled in different colors. So the cycle has been repeating. The cycle has been repeating continuously. So how to break these cycles? How to break these cycles and how to actually make them understand the oneness of human consciousness, the oneness of soul, oneness of the grace, beauty, and greatness that each individual holds, how we can be tolerant to others' culture, language, and how we can be open to the wisdom of the indigenous, the wisdom of the scientific method, the wisdom of ancient methods. So how to keep these human minds open for knowledge? Do you have anything to say, Pat Duckworth? I think this seems to be a very important subject which has to be understood thoroughly, so that practically all the listeners who are watching us across the world will be much more benefited from your insights.
Another huge question, and so many thoughts were going through my head as you were saying it, because Africa is this cradle of civilization where our ancestors came into being and became human, became what we now recognize as human. And then I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of Dunbar's number, this idea that when a group of people get to a certain size, that has to split, that we start then to form sub-communities. And the people who moved out, the people who were the adventurers who went on to populate other parts of the world, would have had a certain mindset. They would have been the brave people, the adventurous people, the risk takers. And so the people, as they moved around the world, they would have looked back on the people who gave birth to them as in some way lesser, the people you left behind, the people who weren't brave enough. And gradually, as the world became populated, we have these pockets of people moving out every time, the first adventurous people and then the second generation of adventurous people. And so in my way of thinking about this, it's always the people who are adventurous look back on the less risk-taking people as somehow lesser, even though they've been brave just to lead their lives the way they do. And an adventurer, you look down on other people who aren't the same as you. So how do we break it down and stay open? Again, I come back to what we're experiencing all around the world at the moment, and the fact that it's almost like Mother Nature, the Earth Spirit, has pressed the reset button, has said, go back to your rooms and think again. Think again about the way you're behaving. Think again about your economies. Think about the lives you're living. Think about the planet that you're living on, and this whole spirituality around how we live on this earth. And I think in the future, hopefully this very near future, this could become the uniting element, that instead of looking at each other as humans and saying, what are you doing wrong and what are you doing wrong and how am I right, we start to think, how can we work together to live on this planet together? Because it's coming to a really crucial point now where we're all being asked to think about our lives, our economy, the way we behave, and find some common ground so that we can keep this planet working well. And I think this is a very spiritual calling, that we now review our lives and we have this small pocket of time in which to unite at a very fundamental human level in order to be able to carry on living on this planet and to see our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren work here. And I think this is a spiritual calling for all of us that may just break down these barriers.
Yeah, correct. These recurrent vicious cycles need to be destroyed once for all. And I think this vicious cycle need to be transformed into virtuous cycles. The mankind are not used to virtuous cycles. They are known to practice only vicious cycles, recurrent self-sabotaging cycles, recurrent self-destructive cycles. So destruction of other human beings, hurting other human beings, is actually destroying one's own self. I think people need to realize this or awaken to this fact. So definitely, yes, it takes some more time. And what I feel is personally, when all the people like you, Pat, Duckworth, Christiana, and other wonderful beings who are all the speakers, more than 1,000 people have joined as speakers for the World Parliament of Spirituality. When we all can join together, when we all can work together, no, we all have individual activities. We have been working, we are doing so many seminars, workshops, and talks from the places of our stay, both in the form of physical events as virtual events and different formats. We have been working. But when the time has come now to have this conversion of scattered activity of individualism to collective activity of for global peace and harmony. So at least 10% of our times, 10% of our energy, if we move from individual to collective activity, if we move from individual pocketed type of activity to much more holistic activity of synergism and symphony, I think much more better activity can be taken up. The random sporadic activities can be converted into the collective converging activities. So the convergence of this very consciousness at a global scale will definitely lead to greater peace and harmony. I think the governments will not come forward. The different types of communes will not come forward. It is a bridging consciousness in the form of the World United or World Parliament on Spirituality. This type of bridging consciousness units which cement all these bricks of wisdom is very much required to present to the world the importance of global peace and harmony. And there's a more workable formula as far as I'm concerned. The reason why I'm in front of you, taking your inputs, your insights, and your knowledge and presenting them to the mankind. So thank you very much, Pat Duckworth. Thanks a lot. So yeah, thank you. Here with the same question. Yep. Yeah, it's okay. Just a second. So Samyukta wants to appreciate you with a certificate too quickly. So thanks to you, Christiana Wessendorf, for being an esteemed speaker of the World Parliament of Spirituality. Thank you very much. So Christiana, the same question I am asking you again: how these vicious cycles can be converted to virtuous cycles? How we can convert all this negativity to positivity? How we can convert all this hatred? Hatred and love both are same. You know, there is spectrum. It is a spectrum. On one pole it is hatred, one pole it is love. So the spiritual awakening is something in between at the meridian. It is neither true love, the way that I understand, which is dependent more on the needs, but unconditionality is different. Unconditional love is totally different. So unconditional love is something in between hatred and love, which is beyond hatred and love. It doesn't fall in the spectrum. So it is beyond these linear understandings. So I think people need to move from polarized thinking to unpolarized thinking. People need to think from dualistic and pluralistic paradigms, need to move from a more converged paradigm of understanding. So how do you feel this? This one of people who are in hatred, when the hatred is broken, they love too much. When love is broken again, they hate too much. So they become victims of their own psychological cages. So how these psychological cages can be destroyed, and how this spectrum of understanding should be understood, and how people should rise to unconditionality. All relationships, all the activities, all the bondings are based upon conditionalities. Everything is terms and conditions. be it business, be it relationships. So how at least in relationship there should not be any terms and conditions. How it should be really unconditional in workforce. How it should be really unconditional in understanding. How it should be really unconditional for a greater cause and greater benefit and greater harmony and peace. So how we can make people rise to the truth of unconditionality. I would like to hear from you your insights and your inputs based upon your experience. Over to you.
I love your passion in this, and my smile went bigger and bigger. And I thought, yes, we need this, yes. And so again, right, I am starting with, I want everybody who is here to understand that, like, we all talk about, like, talk from a point of experience. Like Pat has so much experience, Dr. Yugandhar, you have so much experience, right? And so, like, we talk about our experience, and we talk about what worked for us, and what we believe can scale, right? So, and for me, it's right. When I was bullying my sisters, I loved your word, Mr. Yugandhar. You said, like, you are imprisoned in your own psychological circle, and you're just putting out anger and hate and aggression, and right. I did this. Okay, so I did this, and I was not proud of me, and actually I hurted myself so much because I love people. I love my sisters. They are one of the most precious person in the world for me. And so hurting them in a way, like, you know, in a range, was hurting myself so much. So it sounds weird for some people, but I can take a stand for the person who are in this aggression and anger, because I believe that everybody wants to be loved. And when you are so aggressive to others, you're always hurting yourself. The people who are the most suffering under this are the people itself who are not knowing how to get out of this circle. It's a very different approach. I invite you to be open, right? And so what I learned over the years, and what I believe I would have loved to know when I was 10 years old, was to communicate within, and to basically access my own inner wisdom. And I believe when our next generation, like when we teach this to our next generation, they will grow up automatically with trusting their inner wisdom stronger, as just following any kind of, you know, a conditioned religion, any very rigid spirituality, because they have this feeling from within. Yes, this is true. No, this is not true for me. And I will take inspired action. I will not do this. And I will take a stand, right? So I really, really believe from my personal experience that when we can start to finish this fight, where we're just putting out anger and aggression, we really start have this beautiful communication with ourselves. Like, for me, it's very connecting to the anger in my body, and give it a shape, and give it a name, and give it a color, and say, okay, what did you do for me in my life? And this, for example, yellow anger says, well, I always wanted to keep you safe. And you said, wow, thank you. That's so lovely from you, right? And okay, what is your love message behind all this aggression, behind Corona? What is in your personal life? What is your love message, right? What it feels like a problem. It feels like a thing what is hurting. But what did you really want it from me? And it will tell us, right? For example, this yellow anger will tell you, well, I always wanted to protect you because I wanted to show you that first, right, you really know what you need in this moment, and then you speak up. That's why I always put you down. That's why you always, were silent, did not want to speak, because I want you to feel yourself first and then speak up, for example. So to give it back to your question, right? Raising the next generation to have such a big connection to the inner wisdom is, I think, a major key to 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 bring the whole world awareness, to raise it up, because there will be more people who are connecting to others, no matter what religion, what skin color, right, whatever they believe, they can, because they can say, I feel you, I see beyond this, and I want to connect, for this purpose, or I want to connect for this specific idea. And this is the way we can have this unconditional conversations.
Wonderful. So unconditionality and unity, in fact, need to be more symphonized to call it as unconditional unity consciousness. Nothing should be based on real terms and conditions. Nothing should be really based on give and take. So the unconditional love, it appears to be more theoretical as of now, but the mankind has to awaken itself to get to this greatest understanding. I think that should be the highest truth, whichever spiritual path or spiritual school of thought can really express. So unconditional unity consciousness is very, very important. So as far as possible, we as speakers of the World Parliament, if we all can join this unconditional unity consciousness movement first to begin with, I think the collective consciousness of at least 1,000 people will descend down through us to at least 10,000 people or 1,000,000 people or more. So to begin with, let's start this movement of unity consciousness, movement of this unconditionality through our own speakers of World Parliament. This I have been expressing to all our speakers, and there is a very good response from each speaker. So I invite both of you, Pat and Christiana, to join this unity consciousness movement, so that we all can do something collectively, something more converging to the mankind, much more useful. So all our sporadic individual activities are definitely will be much helpful, but even more greater than this, our collective activity will have powerful impact, a greater impact. This is what I personally feel, and I personally invite both of you to join this movement, and let us all together can do it. So herewith we have got Vivek Anandi. Vivek, please show up yourself, and Vivek, are you here? Okay. Meanwhile, please display a small token of appreciation of Christina Wessendorf. Here it is. We are humbled by your presence. We are humbled by your knowledge and wisdom. So it is a token of appreciation to you, Christiana, for being an esteemed speaker for the World Parliament of Spirituality Europe chapter, and it is the 3rd edition in the row. So we are going to have the 4th World Parliament in 2024, definitely. So meanwhile, we are going to have a lot of activities in between. 2021, we are going to have nation-wise, like we have continent-wise activities this time. We are going to have nation-wise summits in 2021. 200 nations, 200 events. So this is the plan of action of the World United. So wherever you are, in whichever geographical mass you travel, so please be a part of that country event. So let us do it together. And not only just as a speaker, from organizing point of view, your energy is much more required for the greater good, greater harmony of the world. So thank you very much once again, Pat and Christiana,